Hey there friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Alex Laux and I have another discussion video for you today. When I first started shooting film, one of the biggest misconceptions that I believed in was that once I had the film loaded into the camera, I had to go with the speed that was indicated by either the DX code or on the box. Of course, now that I've been doing this for more than 20 years, I know that that's just not true. So today I'm going to be discussing over and under exposure, as long as pushing and pulling your film, what everything means, and just sorting out all the confusion that you often see online with this subject. So when it comes to film, each film has a speed at which it produces the best results at according to the manufacturer. This speed is often measured with something like ISO or ASA. In older films, you might find it listed as a degree indicator, such as DIN, DIN, or if you're into old Soviet films, the GOST scale. These days, most films use the ISO scale, which when I'm shooting film, I refer to it as ASA just to separate it from my work on digital, which I use ISO. And when it comes to film speeds, you often have a bit of latitude with it, depending on the film. You'll have a greater ability to under and overexpose the film with a black and white or color negative than you will with a slide film or an E6 film. And that's just because of the nature of how the films are made. So when I say box speed, I mean the speed that is printed on the box or given by the DX code. Of course, a lot of photographers feel that sometimes the box speed is not the ideal speed at which a film can be exposed at, but that's a subject for a whole other video and definitely worthwhile to experiment with, because as soon as you discover what the ideal film speed of a specific stock is for the work you're doing, you'll be able to produce amazing, consistent results. So what happens if you're in a situation where you have a film that is either too fast for the situation or too slow for the situation? Well, the nice thing is that if you're shooting, again, black and white or color negative film, these films have enough latitude that you can either overexpose them or underexpose them. Now, a lot of times people will use overexpose and underexpose interchangeably with the terms push and pull, but we'll get to those in a little bit. The thing is that when you're actually exposing the film, you're not pushing or pulling it. You're either overexposing it, which means you're shooting it slower than the speed, the box speed, or underexposing it, or shooting it faster than the box speed. And these are measured in what's called stops. And the best way to describe a stop is either halving for overexposure or doubling for underexposure. I know they're opposite of each other. You underexpose to shoot a film faster or overexpose it to shoot a film slower. So, for example, if you're shooting Ilford HP4, which is an ASA 400 box speed, if you underexpose it by a stop, you're going to set your camera's light meter to ASA 800. Or if you don't have the ability to adjust the film speed manually, you can use the EV compensation by setting it to -1. If you're going to overexpose it by a stop, you're going to set your film speed indicator to ASA 200 or EV +1. It's confusing, it takes a lot to get your head wrapped around it. I know it took me a long time to actually figure this out myself. And it means that you can really give your film a lot more life to it. A good example, if you're shooting in low light conditions, you can give yourself that extra boost of speed by shooting it 1, 2, even 3 stops over in some cases. Or if your shutter speed tops out at like 1/1000th of a second, you can overexpose it to help get your film within a range that you can actually use your camera in like bright sunlight. And the nice thing is, again, HP5 is one of those where you have at least plus or minus 2-3 stops of latitude that will still deliver usable results to you. And the same can be said about some color negative film. Portra 400, for example, if you can afford it, you have that same plus minus 3 stops. Or if you're shooting more consumer branded stuff like Kodak Gold or Ultramax 400, you probably have about 2 stops on either side. Okay, so once you've over or underexposed your film, what's your next step? Well, the nice thing is that you can just develop it normally. That means that you take the times that are listed either on the film datasheet or the massive dev chart and develop it at the regular time. Now, not all film can handle this, right? If you overexpose it, you'll get really dense negatives, or if you underexpose it, you'll get very thin negatives. You might be able to do a lot with good scanner software and post and editing software, but it won't really look that good, especially if you try to bring out details that just aren't captured on the film medium. So this is where the terms push and pull come into play, where you either lengthen or shorten your development times to compensate for that over and under exposure. And again, we use the term stops. So probably the best example is that if you overexpose the film, you're going to pull it in your development. That means you're going to shorten the length of time you develop the film. And that will mean you'll get a better looking negative that is much easier to print in a darkroom or scan on your scanner. In the same way, if you've underexposed, you're going to want to lengthen your time in development or push it. And again, it gives you that much better negative. Of course, there are changes to how things look when you push or pull. And it's just to taste. And it takes a great deal of experimentation to get things to where you want it to be. So I wouldn't start experimenting with something that is super important or a paid job right away, unless you absolutely know what you're doing. And in some cases, you don't even have to. An example being like Kodak T-Max 400, you can develop it in Kodak D76 stock solution for the same time, whether you've exposed it at ASA 400 or ASA 800. The best thing to do is to just look at the data sheets, and of course online resources like the massive dev chart are often 95% of the time the best way to do things, because they're often crowdsourced from people who have experimented and have determined that yes, you can actually do this. And the same goes for color negative film. Portra 400, again as an example, you can just develop it normally, whether you've underexposed it by 2 stops or overexposed it by 2 stops, you will get perfectly usable images. And in the case of overexposure with most color negative films, you'll get a much softer, more pastel look to the images, which, if that's your thing, looks kind of pleasing. And I've found, especially with Cinestill 400D, for example, or Portra 400, a little bit of a overexposure goes a long way and really softens those punchy colors, and if you're shooting this in the summer, makes it really, really pleasing to look at, whether it's in print form or on a screen. Now, do you have to over and underexpose your film before you start pushing and pulling in development? Of course not. There are lots of examples where you can either choose to overexpose and develop normally, the best being the rule of thumb when it comes to expired film, where you overexpose it by a stop per decade. Not in every case, but it is just a good general rule of thumb if you're not sure about how well the film has been stored. So you overexpose it and then you develop it at the normal times to overcome some of the poor results that come from a film that's been sitting around for 2-3 decades. It will help cut that base fog and really help compensate for any loss of sensitivity. But on the flip side, if you're someone who uses a zone system a lot and you want to keep those tones within those 5 stops of difference between your bright white and your black, you can either choose to push or pull in development to compensate for that. So you just expose the film as you prefer to, and then either shorten or lengthen the time to get those tones within that 5-stop range. And that's why you really have to be careful when telling people about this and using these terms online. Because again, when it comes to exposing film, you use the term over and underexposure. And when developing film, you use the term push and pull. And goodness knows, I'm guilty of this too. I've used the wrong terms many, many times before I finally figured out what I was doing, and I was gently corrected by someone that, hey, look, you know, you're giving inaccurate information. So I immediately figured out where things went. And I feel much better for it, which is why I wanted to put this little piece together so that someone who is new to the world of photography and wanting to make sure that they're doing things accurately and providing accurate information can do it right. So in brief summary, when you are underexposing your film, good chance you want to push it in development. And if you're overexposing film, you want to pull it in development. Well, that about covers it for this video. Let me know in the comments below, what are your experiences with over and underexposure of film, push-pull development? How do you use this in your own photography? Personally, before I got priced out of using it too often, I loved overexposing T-Max 100 and rating it at ASA 32, and then pulling it in development. I found that it gave me a look close to one of my favorite film stocks, Kodak Panatomic X. Not perfectly, but close enough that I didn't have to go hunting for potentially poorly stored rolls of Panatomic X, or ones that cost an arm and a leg, that I'd basically go like, you know what, I can shoot T-Max 100 cheaper. If you've done this before, let me know in the comments below. If you have any questions about what I've said or want some more clarifications, by all means, ask them in the comments. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting that bell notification icon. And if you like what you see, give me a thumbs up. It always helps, and it makes me feel really good and makes me want to make more of these videos for you. Until next time, my name's Alex Laux. Get out there, stay safe, make something awesome happen.